Hey there, it's Mark and welcome back to Segue to Reason. Now, in two previous videos, we've been exploring the age-old question of why does God allow evil and suffering? But for this video, I want to flip things around a bit by posing the question, well, what if God didn't exist? What then? Would that affect in any way how we perceive evil and suffering? Because there are many people in our secular culture who assume that with or without God, evil is still evil, good is still good, and suffering is always wrong. But if God didn't exist, would that truly be the case? Does Mother Nature share our values? Well, watch this video all the way to the end and judge for yourself. Now, before we even begin, let me quickly point out something that I should have stated in episode number 1, and it's this. Can evil and suffering even be used as an argument against God's existence? Now, without doubt, evil and suffering does pose a major problem for someone such as myself who does believe in a personal and loving God. But for argument's sake, and hear me out on this, does God really have to be loving in order to exist? For example, there are many scientists, both past and present, who would say that they believe in a God, but view this God more as an impersonal force, a prime mover who created the universe but has basically left it to run itself. Or consider the late Sir Anthony Flew, probably the greatest atheist of the 20th century, who nevertheless in the last few years of his life conceded that the scientific evidence would seem to strongly suggest a supernatural causation. Now, while he never fully embraced the idea of a personal and loving God, he did nevertheless publicly renounce his atheism. Simply put, evil and suffering cannot be used as an argument to prove that God does not exist. It's a fundamentally flawed argument based more upon emotionalism rather than logic. And now that we have that bad argument out of the way, let's look at today's question. If God didn't exist, would that affect our view of evil and suffering? In 1990, NASA took a now iconic image of the Earth from over 6 billion kilometers away, in which the Earth is this barely perceptible pale blue dot. And the late atheist and science communicator Carl Sagan famously pointed out that all of human existence is represented by that tiny dot. According to him, that should inspire all of us to see ourselves as equals, as global citizens, working together for the common good. Now, as a Christian, I can wholeheartedly agree with Sagan. God says that we are to be good stewards of the earth. God says that all are created equal in His sight. God says that how we treat the least among us is how we treat Him. Now, you might want to mock me right now for using a so-called imaginary sky god as an ethical reference point. But before you do, think about it. What was Sagan using as an ethical reference point? For couldn't someone else look at that same insignificant dot and come to a radically different conclusion? Do you think if Hitler had seen it, he'd draw the same conclusion as Sagan? Do you think he would have ordered his troops to drop their weapons, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya? I don't think so. So what would make Sagan's view of that tiny dot morally correct, but Hitler's morally wrong? Now, I'm not going to get into the whole big debate as to whether or not Hitler was an atheist. But what is clear is that he based his moral sense of right and wrong, of good and evil, upon nature, that life was one constant struggle for existence, of blood and soil, where there could only be one clear winner. As he would state, success is the sole earthly judge of what is right. Being raised on a farm amongst nature, I've never viewed Mother Nature through the rose-tinted glasses as so many of my city-dwelling counterparts do. Mother Nature is a psychopath. She's no social activist, no crusader for equality and human rights. She's no social justice warrior. For to her, the only thing that is good and noble is whatever that is advantageous. She doesn't care about the means, she only cares about the results. Nature is a very scary thing to base your whole ethics upon. But if there is no God holding us accountable to a different standard, then what else is there? Carl Sagan, like so many others, claimed to be an atheist, and yet nevertheless had to smuggle in through the back door a moral sense of right and wrong, of good and evil, that could only be true if there was a God. Sure, he could believe all he wanted, that his view of that pale blue dot was a morally correct view, but at the end of the day, wasn't that just his opinion? Well, I trust that you've enjoyed this video, and if so, please click on the share button, and yeah, if you haven't already, please also click on the subscribe button. This is Mark. Thanks for watching, and keep searching. Okay, you want one? Another one? Yeah?